We're gonna do some pretty amazing science right now. You guys are not gonna believe this. Okay, you ready? It floats! Yeah, I know you're not surprised by this, but you should be, because everything else, when it's solid, is much more dense than when it's liquid, just like gases are much less dense than liquids are. But that simple characteristic of water, that its solid form floats, is one of the reasons why life on this planet, as we know it, is possible. And why is it that solid water is less dense than liquid water, while everything else is the exact opposite of that? Well, you can thank your hydrogen bonds once again. So at around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 degrees Celsius if you're a scientist or from a part of the world where things make sense, water molecules start to solidify, and the hydrogen bonds in those water molecules form crystalline structures that space molecules apart more evenly, in turn making frozen water less dense than its liquid form. So in almost every circumstance, floating water ice is a really good thing. If ice were denser than water, it would freeze and then sink, and then freeze and then sink, and then freeze and then sink. So just trust me on this one, you don't want to live on a world where ice sinks. Not only would it totally wreak havoc on aquatic ecosystems, which are basically how life formed on the Earth in the first place, it would also, all the ice in the North Pole would sink, and then all of the water everywhere else would rise, and we wouldn't have any land. That would be annoying. There's one more amazing property of water that I'm forgetting. Why is it so hot in here? Heat capacity. Yes, water has a very high heat capacity, and probably that means nothing to you, but basically it means that water is really good at holding on to heat, which is why we like to put hot water bottles in our bed and cuddle with them when we're lonely. But aside from artificially warming your bed, it's also very important that it's hard to heat up and cool down the oceans significantly. They become giant heat sinks that regulate the temperature and the climate of our planet. Which is why, for example, it's so much nicer in Los Angeles, where the ocean is constantly keeping the temperatures the same, than it is in, say, Nebraska. On a smaller scale, we can see water's high heat capacity really easily and visually by putting a pot with no water in it on a stove and seeing how badly that goes. But then you put a little bit of water in it, and it takes forever to freaking boil. Oh, and if you haven't already noticed this, when water evaporates from your skin, it cools you down. Now, that's the principle behind sweating, which is an extremely effective, though somewhat embarrassing part of life. But this is an example of another incredibly cool thing about water. When my body gets hot and it sweats, that heat excites some of the water molecules on my skin to the point where they break those hydrogen bonds and they evaporate away. And when they escape, they take that heat energy with them, leaving me cooler. Lovely. Well, this wasn't exercise, though. I don't